Welcome to Discussions of Music, Healing, and Consciousness with your hosts, Chris Noble and Bill Protzman. On this podcast, Chris and I offer a spontaneous, ongoing conversation about how music is intertwined with healing and consciousness. Our first season helped lay the foundation and build some of the superstructure for what we want to do here in Season 2, where we'll be welcoming some intriguing guests, going deeper into ancient mysteries and wisdom, and cultivating your background knowledge and curiosity. We hope these discussions will inspire your own study and practice of the musical and healing arts, and that your contribution to advancing world consciousness will be satisfying for you and transformative to those around you. Let's get started. If you're listening right now, everybody, we're going to try to make this shorter. Don't hold us to that.
2 hours later.
2 hours later.
Right?
They're still talking.
Yeah, that
Is anybody still listening?
Well,
it gets like that way. It's intense. You want to keep talking about this stuff, and finding a way to end it is often the challenge.
That's a good challenge, good problem to have. It means we love talking about these things. We enjoy each other's conversation, and I know I certainly do, Bill. It's always such a blast just talking about these nerdy music, consciousness, healing conversations as we do. And for the listening audience, Bill was kind enough to onboard me recently into his whole world of music morphic or musa morphic.
I know you have to say it a few times.
You got to say it a few times, but it's a clever little mishmash of wording there, and you can see it on his background here if you're watching this podcast. There you go, musamorphic. And so Bill onboarded me to basically what you could call the quest.musamorphic.com platform. And really what that is it's a interactive learning platform that Bill has pretty much put together in a sense of leading you through this, musical, spiritual, mindfulness-based type of interactive journey of how you can implement sound and music into your life in a holistic and healing and mindful and, yes, I'll say the word sacred way. And I just got through
thank you for that. It is sacred.
It is sacred. And as Bill mentions in one of the levels or missions that you go through, it's like any course. You go through one level, then you get to the next and the next and the next. And as I was going through some of them today, you bring up that word sacred, and it is a loaded word, as you mentioned in the course itself. But it's a beautiful word, and it's also just something it's loaded because we've got centuries, if not millennium, of stigma from other religious factors and sections that have obviously taken this to an extreme degree and used it to manipulate and whatnot. But we're bringing it back to its origins, the root of the word in this episode, which is just special. More than anything, to simplify it, sacred really just means something that's special and intentional, and something that you're really practicing presence with. And that's really the approach that we can take. We have the option and the choice to take with music. But what I really wanted to dig into today, Bill, and I genuinely want your to get your 2 cents on what your definition is of this at first, is a music rite. And I'm saying rite as spelling in English is R-I-T-E.
Yes, like a ritual.
Like a ritual. Right. Yeah. And so, like, what to you is a music rite? What does that mean to you?
Oh my gosh. So great question. I can talk about what they are, but why they're important is probably a little bit more interesting. And after we do that, then they'll become sort of obvious. But you've been to concerts, right? Everybody goes to a concert. And there's sort of this thing that happens where, before the warm-up band, everybody's crazy, nuts, whatever. And then the warm-up band comes out and the lights change, and you do that, and then the warm-up band is gone and the lights come back up, and then there's a stage set change, and then the actual band that you paid to hear is there. This whole process of how it all goes, it's more than a set of stage instructions. It's like what we expect. So we've learned how to go to concerts, and there's this order of the way things happen. And if you think about that just a little bit further than, it's going to be this, then it's going to be that, it starts to fall into a pattern. And our expectations are aligned with that pattern. And even our intentions are aligned with that pattern. I mean, I know whole people that will not show up until an hour and a half after the start time of the show because they don't care about the warm-up band. and they miss a bunch of music. But their ritual for going to concerts is a little bit different than mine, because I'm there like, a half an hour early because I want to be there when the people come in. I want to experience the whole thing like right from the start. And those intentions are kind of what I mean by ritual. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And you're absolutely right. We've been absolutely taught how to go to concerts without even knowing it. And there's so many things that we're taught within a concert setting that you could compare to what we would currently, and certainly in the past, look to as traditions in another in a more spiritual religious setting
Oh,
with
sure. Yeah.
music, where it's the same type of expectations, the same type of learned behaviors. You have to stand and take your hat off for this particular song, right? We're
Right.
we're still conditioned with national anthems to
Raise
do a
your lighter
specific
for some song,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Raise your glass. And at a wedding, there's all these traditions and almost ceremonies that go into music that are of course ancient, but also in a way modern, like the modern day concert.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so interesting. I just, as a fun sort of anecdote on the side here, I recently got back from a tour just in like middle of Canada in the prairie area, and we played 3 shows, and I was experimenting in these shows with some more performance tactics and really basic stuff, but stuff that I was excited to explore more of. And the gentleman I'm performing with is a phenomenal performer, so he was really pushing me to up my performance. And one of the simple tricks that any musician can do, any performer can do, is to play with the space that you're in on stage. And so there's again these expectations, and then when you can push some of those expectations or go into a new area of expectations. So what I mean by that is there's several moments during the set where I would solo, and I have a separate instrument. I'm playing piano mostly, and then I have a separate instrument, a melodica. It's like a portable little accordion for those that don't know.
No, it's not horrible, man. It's cool.
No, it's a portable.
Oh,
Sorry, I didn't mean
portable.
to say.
Sorry.
It's an awesome instrument.
It's
I
an
love the
awesome instrument.
melodica. I love it very much. It sounds like an accordion had a baby with like a harmonica or something like that. It's like sort of in between it. That's small,
Yeah.
easy to move around with. So for me with soloing, it's great because I was able to stand up off the piano bench, and we would set up a separate mic at the front of the stage, and I'd walk up to the front of the stage and then rip a little solo there. And no matter how small or large the audience was, they all knew that it was like I could have sucked on the solo, and I think I did all right. But regardless, it almost didn't matter. Is that I stood up, walked to the front of the stage, did my thing, and then walked back. And then it would always get an applause. Sometimes people would stand and applaud because it was, I guarantee you, if I did the same musical thing sitting down, I don't think it would have received anything close to the same appreciation and applause,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I moved in a way that was sort of standard. Oh, it's the soloist. He's standing up. He's moving to the front of the stage. He's being theatrical in his movements, and he's really like into the solo. And musically, there was no difference, but physically, I was doing so many different things. And I think that is again a very traditional trick in music that plays with the space on stage, but it does so in a way that everyone knows he's doing the solo, and
This is, yeah.
everyone knows that you always yay, at the
Yeah.
end of the solo, right? And so that, and then the other famous thing was that you take a bow at the end of the show. And
Right.
sometimes when you're an independent musician and you're not playing the biggest shows, you can forget that, especially when the concert's done and it's just sort of like dead space. But these shows that we played were bigger audiences and very well received shows, so we get these big resounding applauses at the end. And me and my co-performer Tennyson King, we would we look to each other like, oh crap, we got to bow. We have to put this part of the performance out there, otherwise it doesn't feel
Yeah.
complete.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the encore, and there's all these traditions that we've been programmed to participate in, whether you're the performer or the audience. And it's so interesting playing with those. So I just wanted to say, from an experiential point of view, like these things are totally real for
Yeah.
both sides, performers and audience.
It's absolutely right. And the question is, are they rituals, right? What makes them ritualistic? And I think the combination of a tradition with the sacred is when it becomes a ritual. So what makes it sacred? Well, the opening perhaps to spirituality. Like if you say, I'm going to do this thing, and it's the reason I'm going to bow is because I'm going to say thank you to the audience, right? That's great. However, to turn that into a ritual, you could say, you could introduce the sacred purpose, right? Or the spiritual purpose, which would be, thank you for sharing this experience. Together, we could not have done it without you, which is a little bit different than just saying thank you, because it sort of brings everybody into the space as one unit rather than saying, here is me and there is you, and thank you very much. I'm saying, here we are all together in this moment that we co-created. It sounds like splitting hairs, I know, but it changes the intention so powerfully. But when you invite that extra level of meaning, if you like to use the word meaning, I call it sacredness because recognizing the spiritual work in the room together is my intention. May not be anybody in the audience. The audience may not even care. But for me, that makes it turns it from an expected sort of traditional thing into a ritual. Does that help?
Yeah, it's really about the intention. I love what you said too about, addressing the audience and really intentionally verbalizing what that sacredness or that ritual is. And when you verbalize it, it does shift everything. And I've been a part of shows where, it's a new, that's not new. It's re-emerging trend, I would
Yeah.
say, in music, to instead of just saying, thanks everyone, good night, it's now, thank you for co-creating this amazing space with us. We really appreciate you. Yada yada. Like, it's a connection to the audience, and not just that, but it's also taking the energy and the intention to let the audience know that there isn't this hierarchy. I think earlier in
Yeah, well
time,
said.
music and even the concept of a stage is above everyone. They're almost deified. These performers are almost godly to us, and they're larger than life, and they're
Yeah.
almost like completely outside of our own reality. But the shows and the artists that we truly connect with the deepest are usually the ones that are able to come down onto a human level and connect individually with us at a core. And a lot of that is like to remove the smoke and mirrors and to acknowledge the kind of oneness in the room, and to, many different ways in which we can eradicate those sort of tiers and those
Yeah.
hierarchy, right?
They talk about the fourth wall, but I think there's a fifth one,
Hmm.
right? And it's easy to break the fourth wall. People do that all the time. That's the one you're talking about, where there's perception of different levels between like the lowly listeners and the amazing performer. But the fifth wall is when you make it all when you bring it all together as one. And if you're in music, particularly if you're in performing music, the magic of that moment of being together with an audience is way beyond anything that you could describe scientifically.
That's the sacred side of it to
That's
me.
the sacred side of it. And accepting that and involving ourselves in that right from the start is, I think it's almost a responsibility that more musicians could accept, whether or not they make it public. My mother always used to tell me before going on stage when I was a kid, she's like, have fun. What? The last thing I'm going to do play this complicated music is enjoy it, right?
I'm dying here. I'm so nervous.
But it got into me, and I realized at one moment that what she was inviting me to do was to find the spiritual side of what was happening out there. That it was more than hitting all the right notes and more than making all the right phrasing and the technical side, blah blah blah, right? And it was more than just looking for an emotion in the music. Classical music is like that. There's deep emotions happening. You got to find them all and hit them properly and all of that, and more than making sure that your memory is exact, all of this stuff. There was something else going on, and that other thing that was going on is what Mom wanted, which is for me to have fun and somehow let go of all that other stuff, or at least bring something of equal value to the piano bench with me. And it wasn't always humorous. Well, there were times where I screwed up. It was pretty funny, but that invitation, and I think maybe a ritual is that too. It's like an invitation to something more. Like, all this is going to happen. We're going to play this piece of music together, and you're going to listen to it. That's all going to happen. But what else is going on in the room, right? And are we aware of, or at least offering uh, the opportunity for that? I think is the right way of saying it. I think ritual opens us to an opportunity more than just repeating a tradition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it can look so many different ways for the listening
Oh,
audience,
truly.
watching
Yeah.
audience too. Like that's the cool thing. We can say the word ritual, which is a very old word, but we can use it to describe, all these different ways in which you can go about a performance ritualistically. For example, just go one song at a time, and depending on the topic or the meaning or the purpose of the song, you can bring it up to the audience. And I do that in my sets, and I did that recently on tour with Tennyson King, and his stories are, or excuse me, his songs are all stories. And so each song usually requires sometimes up to a 5-minute intro, like where he speaks to the audience. I'm playing the intro, like the song chord progression in the background as he's talking, and he leads everyone through like what brought him to write the song, the story behind it, and also ways that they can interact with the song, whether there's sing-along parts, clapping, whatever it is. And like it's almost like and it's done in an entertaining, fun way. He gets a lot of laughter from the audience. He's very good at not just not taking himself too seriously, and he's sometimes telling very compromising stories and pretty hilarious like anecdotes, but they bring a humility, and also bring both of us, in not a bad way at all, bring us down, or depending on how you look at it, bring the audience up to our level, and we make it an even playing field, and we
Yeah.
get people to like say things out of like, have you guys encountered that, and like, yeah, no, and like all those things are ways to make it ritualistic, because you're including everyone in with this thing we call music and performance. So I would agree
Yes.
with you, Bill. Yeah.
I think we can over ritualize stuff too,
Oh yeah,
where
yeah.
it goes off the deep end, but
I've been to shows like that for
right,
sure. Yeah.
right. But the
It's like, can you
organic
just play the music
nature
for
of it.
crying out loud?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Just stop already.
Yeah. There's a balance.
It's a fine one. I mean, the ritual of live performance is one thing. Um, in the quest that you're talking about, the idea is to develop your own very private listening rituals. And a lot of us just put on music, right? It's like put on music, and that's fine. A lot of us do yoga poses too, right? Or meditate, and there's no wrong to this. You can do it any way you like, but bringing some intentionality to it is the focus, because at least as far as I've been able to determine, maybe you feel the same way, that when you combine a MEPS tool like music, like the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual tool like music, with an intention, it's like, whoa, look out. This is some powerful stuff right now. You can have the intention by itself, but when music brings your holistic being together with that intention, wow, that is really powerful. And ritual is a good way of doing that. It quiets and focuses the mind, right? It quiets the emotions, or at least brings them to neutral, where you're ready to accept something new. Um, it brings you to physical stillness if it's a really good ritual. Why do we kneel in prayer? It makes us stop. We can't walk when we're kneeling, right? So there's a ritual aspect to that. And of course, the ritual is opening to spiritual, where you say, okay, here I am, fill me up, right? And you're asking something other than the physical, emotional, or mental parts of you, that download, to come into the room, right? So the music as a MEPS tool combined with intention, powerful stuff. And ritual is it's a shorthand way of being able to open that up, I think.
Yeah, and just again, I'd love to hear what your examples would be, Bill, but I'll give a couple of my own, just really basic stuff that you
Sure.
guys listening and watching can digest, right? And maybe this might offer some things that you can bring into your life with music, intentionally, ritualistically, holistically, sacredly listening to. So a great simple example would be usually first thing in the morning. I'll wake up, I'll meditate while in bed, just so that I've got it done before anything else happens. And then if I meditate later, great. I got bonus meditations, awesome. And then once I'm out of bed, one of the first things I'll do is try to have some quiet time, maybe I might do some movement first, but regardless, is what I go on is I put on my Spotify, I'll find some music just to put on the background just to get the day started. And right there is a great opportunity to get more ritualistic with music. And I can listen to my own advice here and get more ritualistic, because some days, you just throw it on and then stop thinking. But what I like to do is put on something for me calming. So that these days, what that looks like, and it's always evolving, it's always changing. These days, that would look like some very sort of soft, mellow Spanish guitar. I really enjoy listening to that in the morning. To kind of takes me to some Mediterranean kind of vibes. I enjoy that. Great. That works for me. Might not work for you. Find what music works for you, of course. And then I just play that in the background as I, had some movement and just do all my morning, rituals or routines. But that music's always playing in the background. And one moment where I like to take some time and really listen to it is usually when I first turn it on, and I'll have a couple of minutes of just contemplation. And sometimes I might be just looking out the window or sitting on my little balcony area or whatever that looks like, and try to take a couple of minutes of just not silence because there's music, but the silence and contemplation of my mind while the music's happening in the background. So that's just one example of a very simple and easy way to bring in a music type of ritual into your day. It doesn't have to be wearing the robes and the garments and
Oh, nuts, man. I like my robes.
I know that's the ritual of, I mean, you see those rituals. I'm making fun of like graduations and stuff like that, which are literally these ancient rituals that still to this day, because they're still wearing the robes, and the
Still wearing
robes
the
are
robes, right?
an ancient practice, like, wait, where do we get that from? Oh my God, like thousands of years ago. So it's like we still do those things, but it doesn't have to look like that for everyday use. It can really be quite basic, but quite effective.
Yeah.
So
I love this. And I'm thinking as you're talking that we should ask you in a few weeks when you're through the quest a little bit further, what's changed about your rituals, right?
well, because even I'm for the listening audience here, this came from my first mission, my first level here in the quest. I mean, this is just number one, so there's many more to come. And this has just provoked a whole episode of our podcast. So I can only imagine what these others are going to do. It's fantastic. And thanks again, Bill. This has been really really nice journey for me. So hey, one of the perks of having a great podcast co-host.
Right. We get to learn stuff. I
We
know
get to
a
learn
whole
stuff
bunch
from each
more
other.
about, ancient mysteries than I ever did before now.
Beautiful.
And you are gonna you're gonna be cursing me by the time it's over. Like, let's make this stop. I'm so tired of learning more about music.
I highly doubt that. But I welcome it. So
Well, I'm glad you're in it. It's a fun quest. I mean, it really is. It's meant to be a lot of fun. On Wednesday in the mastermind, you made me think of something, is that we should talk about the difference between the shadow journey and the heroic journey.
Oh yeah.
Which is a really good question. And first question that Chris had of going the quest, because I think there's an onboarding question, right? It says, have you ever taken a shadow journey? Have you ever taken a heroic journey, right? Have you taken both? Well, what's the difference, right? So we should talk about that, because there is a difference depending on how you
oh yeah
start the journey, right? And it's fair to say that while we mostly make movies about successful heroes, failure is 9 times out of 10 what you get. But it doesn't mean that you've failed that journey. It means you're ready for the next one.
Exactly. And what is failure, right? Failure is just learning in a way.
Yeah, failure is learning in disguise or something. What's that famous quote?
I honestly don't remember, but it's something along those lines. Every innovator, every famous inventor throughout time will be the first to always admit that the failure is the number one. Like, you have to accept that in order to get anywhere, because that's just the road it is. I wanted to quickly bring it back to the this music, right? And I have the page pulled up here, and this will be in the show notes. Bill will throw in a way to start the process to be able to access this information, because there is a wonderful onboarding process. I highly recommend everyone get in. Check it out. Take it for a spin.
Take a look.
Take it for a test drive. Get in touch with Bill, and he'll set you up with that. And it's I find really provocative. And one of the things I wanted to bring up that's in this first mission, this first level here again, are these what is a music right? You know, getting more into the definition for everybody here, and or a music ritual, right? Ritual. And I like these definitions you have here. So I'm going to read them out and just see how they sit in your mind, everybody.
Sure.
So number one, these are the elements. These are the basic elements that a music right has to have. Number one, it guides us through an emotional arc. Absolutely. That makes perfect sense to me. Also, that's like a story, right? So it's like a ritual in a way, is almost kind of like leading you through this story. A story always has an arc to it as well. Number two, the music right does not need words. That's absolutely true as well. I love a lot of instrumental music myself. Mostly write instrumental, and that is a story and a half. It's just told through the language of music and instruments and all that. So that's beautiful. And of course, number three, it takes time. And I think that's one of the basic definitions of music in general, is it has to, you don't listen to music for the last note of the song. You listen to it for the duration of that journey, which is also a great metaphor for life in general and practicing presence.
It's the journey.
100%. You don't dance for the last beat of the dance, right? You're dancing for the time, for the duration of that,
Yeah.
the whole song and dance. Number four, it has a specific purpose. Very important. And I would bring that also into the idea of intention, right? What's your intention and what's the intention of the musical, right? The performance, whatever it is. But it needs to have a specific purpose or intention.
Yeah. Very clear.
Intention.
The clearer the purpose, the better the right.
100%. 100%. Exactly. And the clearer the outcome, usually.
Oh, yeah. The clearer the outcome is, you could get a really crazy amorphous answer that doesn't help, or you could get a very specific one that does. So what would you choose?
Yeah.
Ask a good question is what, it comes down to.
100%. And then number five, it speaks to something deep inside us that we often can't name. This one I really love because I've heard so many times, and we've had it on I believe the first episode of this season of the podcast, when we had Dr. Haley Fox on, and she spoke to music as, or art in general, but we'll say for right now, music is the language of the ineffable. It describes what we can't describe in words, and there's so much we can't describe in words. Pretty much anything outside of our five senses in this third dimensional reality we can't describe in words, which is a lot. It's pretty much everything.
Yeah.
We don't really have words for it. And music, I would say, is one of my favorite ways to describe emotion, describe metaphysical concepts and realities and dimensions and all these things that we just can't put words to.
Yeah.
A musical right can absolutely bring us into that understanding. And once again, words might not come to you.
It's also a weak word, right? Because we think it's in the mind, but it's so much more, right? It's like awareness, acceptance. They tell me that German is really good for words like this, to be able to describe these metaphysical concepts, but I don't know German.
Yes,
so.
I don't either. And I heard one German word only a couple of days ago. It was exactly what you it describes something very, very specific within an emotion kind of thing. So something like we only have one word for it, and they dive deeper and have like four words for it or something like that.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of really great languages, some of the more ancient languages as well, ancient Hebrew and Sanskrit and things like that are actually loaded with frequency and with even deeper knowledge. That's a whole other can of worms, of course, another podcast. But yeah, better languages for that. English, not so much. However, we're doing our best on this podcast.
We do our best.
So that's why we use music. That's why we got musical rights. And number six on the basic elements of a musical right is that it's sacred. And we went over that already. Sacred, special, intentional. That's really what we mean. And the last element is that it uses music as a tool. And that's really what we've been harping on since our first ever episode on this podcast, is music as a tool, right? It's such an interesting thing to really wrap your head around as a tool, because we're so conditioned to listen to music as entertainment.
Right.
Do you even remember, Bill, like when, I don't know, I'm trying to think, I don't really know when I started to switch the gears in my mind of like, music is more than entertainment. I can't remember when that would have started to switch for me.
I don't know if
that's a big epiphany.
I kind of went the other way, because growing up as a classical musician, right? The last thing
Fair
you
enough.
think about going to a piano recital is how entertaining it is. Even when you're playing, you're still
Oh
worried about,
man.
you've got all that tension before you actually play.
Yeah,
So it
it's
went
so
the
true.
reverse. And when I discovered that music could be entertaining, for me as a performer, right,
Yeah.
that changed everything, right? Learning to play ragtime was what did it. And all
Oh
of a sudden
wow.
I realized that there was a power that was far beyond, Bach, Beethoven, and Mozart, which I'm now always happy to experience as entertainment, but that insight didn't really hit me. So I'm like the outlier. I'm not the best person to answer your question.
Well, but when you were going at it from a classical perspective, was it really also though being approached as a musical rite or as sacred, or was it more just something to play in perfection to nail the concert, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
to do what the
Hmm.
traditional classical world, and I would say the more recent classical world, because let's be honest, Beethoven, Bach, Mozart were not playing the way that we tell us musicians to play it now. Those guys were the
No.
rock stars for
Yeah.
anyone listening. They were not classical musicians at the time of their existence. They were the rock stars, the
It was
pop
rock and roll.
stars.
Yeah.
It was rock and roll back then, and they were entertainment for everybody, including the
Yeah.
elites, obviously. But um, so I don't know. Was it? Were you really going in? I'm not. I don't know. I'm just asking these
Yeah.
questions.
And
Or
I've
did
never
that
thought about
shift
this.
happen? Did it happen even after like your epiphany of it being entertainment as well? Okay, and then years later, you started to get down to like music therapy, sound therapy. Was it when those things started to open up that you're like, oh, wait a minute, music? Because you work with people and prescribe essentially music to them and help them put their perfect playlist together to help with their own mental, emotional, spiritual welfare. Like there's them, it clicked at some point, right?
It did. It was gradual though, because um, the thing that I think made me different, Chris, was I was more interested in what was happening in the audience than most of my peers and why it was happening, you know. And there was research that was following me. So I went through music school in the late 90s. So there was research that was coming up in the music therapy world at that time that was really helpful in its understanding. And of course, neuroscience sort of blew up. The Oliver Sacks books had been around for a while. So people were starting to make the connections between music and how it works on us. And along with that, there was me like wondering what's happening in the audience while I'm playing certain music and paying attention to that and having feedback, people coming up and saying, I really needed that song. Okay, well, if you really need something, um, there's more to it than just being entertained by hearing it, right? What's going on there? So it was the audience basically that taught me that there was a skill set here in this music. And it wasn't a skill set that I had, it was a skill set that was internal to all of us, where there's something that we can use about music. So that's when I started to talk about music as a tool, but it was gradual. I mean, it took, I don't know, 20 years of performing and paying attention and some research that was starting to happen and scientific stuff that was coming along and just sort of combining all of that um, led me to start teaching it as a tool the way that I do now. Starting in, oh, I don't know, the early 2000s, I guess. I've been at this tool thing now for more than 20 years.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense too, Bill. Right? It's almost always a gradual thing because I
Yeah,
can't think of a particular incident. I mean, there's catalyst moments, but they're all like kind of blended together, right, to
right.
create
Yeah,
many years of slow epiphany, kind of slow awakening into this amazing realm of music and sound being used as a tool. And now it's yeah, it's fantastic to be able to have that perspective because like with any new perspective, it allows you the mindfulness to just tune into it more often. So the questions can start to come up in your mind that maybe didn't before, which is okay, what song do I need right now? Even
right,
just something as simple
right.
as that, right?
How do I want to listen to this? Do I want to listen to it as background music? Do I bring my full focus to it and listen to it? Do I want to play it? Right?
Yeah.
What's the engagement that I want with this music?
Do I
And
need to
that
sing it?
becomes again part of your ritual, right?
Exactly.
Part of your experience of it. And there are times where I don't want to engage. I just rather it wash over me, right?
Yep. Yep.
You know, or I'm doing something else. I need something supportive. And then there are times where I really want to focus. And the focus moments are talk about full presence,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome for that. So I mean, I guess I would love to hear, from everyone watching, listening, consuming our podcast. Like, now that you've heard us talk about these musical rites, rituals, ways to make music sacred and create your own ritual with it, what's your ritual look like? Let us
Yeah.
know.
Drop a
Um,
comment.
yeah,
Even, this is audio, so record something if you want
absolutely.
and drop it in. I think you can, well, I don't know if you can do that on YouTube or not, but you can certainly drop it on us via email and we
Yeah.
can add that in as, audio, maybe in a separate podcast. Here's a podcast composed of nothing but our listeners' rituals that they have music rights for.
I think it's a great idea, and I mean, we'd love to hear from any of you about that. So let us know, email us, or yeah, just drop us a comment. And also feel free to share what other ways have you used music as a tool for your own well-being, enhancement, or just pure fun and pleasure. What are these fun ways? Is it a specific ritual you have when you go to take a shower and you have to have your music with you? Is it a way that you drive to certain locations with a particular playlist? Is that the one time you can really belt out the lyrics that you really want to belt out, is when you're in that perfect sound box enclosure that's called a
We're
car,
gonna get people singing in the shower, singing in the car. Great. Yeah, people hit us. We won't complain, but I don't know if we'll air any of it. You wouldn't want to hear me singing in the shower, folks.
No, but that's the beauty of it, is
It's
just
the
let it
beauty.
out,
Let it out. Yeah,
let it
let it
out.
go. How'd we do?
It'll
We promised people we wouldn't go too long. Did we go too long?
I was kind of feeling like we've closed it at a pretty good time here. It's definitely shorter.
Good.
It's definitely one of our shorter episodes, but I think you listening audience, you guys, you appreciate some variety. So we're giving you some variety.
Give us
Don't
a
worry.
variety. Yeah.
We
It's all
got you.
good. It's all good.
It's all good here. But
Say, before we go, I want to come back to the frequency thing that we were doing last time, because that's fascinating to me. And if I can feel out how a way of how to boil it down into something that's cogent, then maybe we can address that. And what I'm thinking about, just so you know, and the listeners know, there's been a lot of talk about John Lennon's Imagine recently
imagine.
and 528 hertz, which is like the love frequency. And I'm sort of orbiting my mind around a show about that. So, listeners, if you've got any ideas, like drop them on us. But I'd love to take that in sort of a technical and a holistic perspective and explore why that song really works, because it really works, right?
It
And I think
does.
personally, I think it's way more than just 528 hertz, but that's just me.
Yeah. Well, I'll save my thoughts for that episode, because I got a lot of them already. So it's
Cool. Yeah, I knew you would.
that's really cool. Yeah. Well, you have even Dr. Emoto's water experiments, right?
Right.
That
Yeah.
took
Yeah.
that song Imagine. So we even have what Imagine looks like photographed in water.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's pretty incredible too. And it's very symmetrical, and it's very has a lot of sacred geometry and Fibonacci mathematics. So there's some pretty cool tangible things we can look at, and of course get into the metaphysical, the spiritual, good old feelings that it feels. And how many out of all the songs too, like, why is it that there's certain songs that when you play with a group of strangers, it just works? And it's like,
Yeah.
I've played a lot of random songs with random people over my life, like in kind of random jams or sing-alongs, things that you're not really planning. And some of the best there's some songs that just seem to work in almost any
Right.
situation. And Imagine by John Lennon certainly is one of those songs. So
Yeah.
why? It's a great
Why?
question. Why? And we won't have necessarily answers to present everyone, but we will definitely have some variables, some hypotheses and theories to bring you for
It might
sure.
take us, 2, 3, 5, 6 episodes too. So,
At least. And these aren't necessarily things we can answer, but it's fun to talk about.
yeah.
I love talking about it here on Discussions of Music, Healing, and Consciousness. So I'm always loving this, Bill. Thanks again for bringing everything you did to the episode, and thanks for onboarding me to the Musomorphic quest that I am now on. And again, everyone, please check out the show notes to get more info on this really cool process that Bill's put together. And I'm so into it right now. It's really fun.
Cool. I love it. I can't wait to see your progress, man. And
Me
thank you, by
too.
the way. Love this. Thanks for putting up with my voice, getting over the cold.
Oh, I
It's
think
all
it's a
right.
nice jazzy kind of loungy blues vibe you
Leonard
got
Cohen
going
kind of
here.
vibe here.
Yeah, exactly. Just need a cigarette hanging out of your mouth.
Yeah,
You're all
really.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hallelujah.
perfect.
Thanks, brother.
All right, Aho. Good to see
Uh,
everyone, and we'll catch you next time.